Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Closed Doors. Today is the workshop Coaching and Motion. It's all about jumping, motion and adding some extra atmosphere to your shot in very easy ways. So join us for today's episode of Behind the Closed Doors. Okay, so what is the deal with that freezing motion? Well, one, it's awesome. Very simple. Freezing motion is just one of the most exciting things I think to do in photography, especially with model photography, flowing hairs, dresses, whatnot more. The other thing is the technique behind it. Now, a lot of people think that with freezing motion you need really fast shutter speeds, up to 1/2000th of a second. How do you do that in the studio? Because when you do that in the studio, you get a black frame. For the very simple reason, you see your second shutter curtain. So we don't want that. In the studio, we normally shoot on 125th of a second. So how can we freeze motion with that? It's actually quite simple. If you shoot without your trigger on your camera, you will find out that, for example, an f16 ISO 100, 125th of a second, you will have a black frame because there's no light hitting the sensor, right? Now, when the strobe fires, you actually do see an image. So that means that without strobe, no image. With strobe, there is an image. And this actually, well, I always explain it very simple, and it's not the complete truth, but it makes it easier to understand. In the studio, your flash duration is actually your shutter speed. So when you know for freezing a jump you need 1/2000th of a second, you need a strobe that has a T05, or even better T01, but you won't see that, T05 of 1/2000th of a second. That is actually the flash duration. So that means if somebody jumps, the flash goes off, it takes 1/2000th of a second to lower the power to half. And that's a really powerful strobe. Now, of course, we use Hensels, and Hensels go way higher than 1/2000th of a second. But if you have a really cheap strobe, often they don't go higher than 1/700th of a second. And that's why with those cheaper strobes, you often find that there's a little bit of blur in your motion. Now, sometimes they can be pin sharp because you timed it correctly. Because there's one moment, only one, where you can literally freeze motion with very slow strobes. And that's the moment when the model goes up and decides, should I go down or should I go back up? And normally on Mother Earth, we go down. It would be weird to go back. Some models can be interesting. But anyway, normally models will go down. So that means that this is one point of acceleration. It slows down, and now they're floating, and then they come back. Now, if you exactly at that point fire your strobe, 1/700th of a second is more than enough. When I started out, I actually used gin-based strobes, and they were really slow, but we still froze some action. The only problem was 1 out of 10 shots would be okay, the rest was total garbage. So fast strobe, fast flash duration, and of course a small aperture, for example f11, f16, because you want to make sure that there's a little bit of wiggle room. Now, this brings us to another very important part. Now, you might say, hey Frank, why should I spend so much money on Elingram Profoto or Hensel strobes or Broncolor or whatever? And I have strobes that also go to 1/10,000th of a second. And that's absolutely true. Sometimes you see strobe adverts where you go like, this isn't really possible. And my grandmother always said, when something looks too nice to be true, it's probably not true. And in that case, it is, well, it is and it isn't. Most cheaper strobes with those insane numbers only have that number on the lowest power setting. And that's useless, because on the lowest power setting, that would mean that you shoot on, for example, 2.8. Try to freeze motion with 2.8. It's impossible because we're shooting with a longer lens, so like 200mm, because you want to make sure that your angle of view is as small as possible, because otherwise the model jumps out of the frame or out of the paper. That's what I actually meant, the background paper. So by using a longer lens, you're going from wide to more narrow, and that means that the model fits on the paper more nicely. Now, when you shoot on 200mm and you shoot on 2.8, you have a very shallow depth of field. And at that point, it's very difficult to nail that focus. When you shoot on f16, you have a much wider space. So that means that the model can just move around a little bit more. And with jumping, they always move around just a little bit more. So that's why we use strobes that are really powerful and really fast on the higher power settings. Mostly around 50 to 75% for maximum freezing motion. So, Hensel Experts 500 today. Awesome for freezing motion. And today, because it's Valentine's Day, I don't know why it's Valentine's Day and this combination, but anyway, today, because it's Valentine's Day, a really special workshop with 2 models today. So enjoy today's episode of Behind the Closed Doors. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Let's go.
Maar even de naam.
Absolutely. Set number 1. I love this setup. Blue backdrop, 1 strobe on the back, 2 side lights and 1 big softbox on the front. Now the thing with this setup is, and that's very important, I'm using a Psychonic 858 light meter. This is a light meter that also has a setting where you can actually meter the speed of your strobes, so your flash duration. And the cool thing about this is that I can actually show students that if I go, for example, let's say setting 8.4, that gave me a value of 1/7000th of a second. But if you only go 2 clicks down, that 1/7000th of a second already dropped down to, let's say, 1/3000th of a second. When you go a little bit up, you go up to, for example, 1/5000th of a second. It's really important for you guys when you want to freeze motion that you know where that point is, the fastest flash duration. Because over the whole range of your strobe, that flash duration changes. Now, if you don't have an expensive light meter like the 858 from Psychonic, what you can do is actually take a fan, so for cooling, right? And just photograph that fan in different settings on your strobe. Now, don't do it on full power, then 1 stop down, 1 stop down. No, don't do it like that. Do it on full power and then go 2/10 down, 2/10 down, 2/10 down. Because in essence, when you go full stop down, you might miss that peak where your strobe is in optimum state. So you want the fastest flash duration. So in this case, we ended up with, I believe, 1/7000th of a second. So that means that if a model jumps, that's your new shutter speed. That's actually the freezing power of your strobe. Finding that out is important. Now remembering what that setting is on your strobes. So normally you can put a little bit of a cheat sheet on your strobes. Like, okay, if I set my strobe on power setting 8.4, I have the fastest flash duration. So now you know when you want fast flash duration, you have to put your strobes on 8.4. You only have to do that once. So after that, we just let our model stand on her toes a little bit and just jump up just a little bit. But most of all, I wanted to show the difference between just standing still and just standing on your toes. It makes a huge difference. Especially you see the whole body just moving around and it just gives a little bit more tension. So when you want to add something to your shoot without making a model jump, just ask her on 3, stand on your toes. And it works like a charm. So that was set number 1. Nee, een amuse. Goudvis kan. Set number 2, we were experimenting with 2 models, Delano and Nadine. Now, in all honesty, with 2 models, it's a little bit more tricky. So I didn't get any images from that one that I really like. I'm just going to show you some images that I shot, but this is one of those setups where you go like, when you do a workshop, you already know it's very difficult to get your shot with only 1 model. Because in all essence, I explain the stuff and then I try maybe 10 shots. If I don't nail it in 10 shots, I have to think about the students. They also have to shoot, right? So this is a little bit of a letdown sometimes because, well, they were great in styling and I would have loved to just pushed it a little bit more to get more action in that shot. But in the end, it's about the theory and of course also that they can practice and they can actually see how difficult it is. You don't go to a workshop for awesome shots. Of course you want a few cool shots, but you go to a workshop for the learning experience. And this is one of those setups. You don't see them a lot in the vlog where I go like, I don't get any image that I like, but hey, at least the information between the two models. So how do you post two models? What can you do? How can you make them interact? So what is storytelling? And what I actually did in this setup was first let the students shoot. Because I find out that if I do the shot first, everybody tries to emulate what I do. Now, when one of the students actually does the first shot, the other students will go like, okay, I want something else. And I don't want to do the same thing as the student before. The cool thing is you saw now 4 totally different setups. And then when I did the setup, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do make Delano jump up and Nadine just push him on his chest, push him away. And because we only had like 10 shots, it didn't work at all. So that's why the image you're going to see now is, it's just crap. But you know, I just wanted to show you one of those images. So, but don't blame me. It's really difficult to do with 2 models and motion in 10 shots. So, hey, here you go. Hey, there you go. Af te dekken. Dan kan ik er feitelijk ervoor zorgen.
Nou, wat blijft er nu helemaal licht?
Dan mag je eerst de gewone houding aannemen en op 3 ga je gewoon lekker je houding zoeken. Even 1, 2, 3. Wow. Now, of course, during a workshop, we sometimes get questions. And one of the questions I get a lot is how to meter a white backdrop. So I thought, let's make it more interesting. Let's first make the white backdrop, and we're using background reflectors from Hensel. So we're using 2 background reflectors on the back, making it pure white. And then 1 big softbox on the front. Everything was perfectly metered. We use spot metering for that to make sure that the backdrop is actually pure white. And if you want to know more about that one, get our instructional video on the light meter. That's really interesting because on that video I explain everything about white backdrops, black backdrops, and also light in light and how you meter dynamic range. It's really, really interesting. And not only if you're interested in light meters, it's also a lot about lighting and techniques. But hey, so white backdrop, 2 reflectors on the back, 1 big softbox. That was the first one. But then I said, you know, accent lighting is great, right? But what if you only have 3 strobes? So in a perfect setup, you have 2 strobes on the back, 2 strobes on your side model, and then 1 in the front. So that's 5 strobes. But if you don't have that, well, if you move your model, let's say this is where your model is, and this is where your backdrop lighting is, right? Because otherwise you also hit your model. There you go. Otherwise you also hit your model. So what we did is if this is the model, we placed the lights just barely next to her and just angled it a little bit. And now that backdrop light has 2 functions. The first one is of course lighting that backdrop. The second one is that I'm using the sides of that light to also give Nadine a little bit of an accent lighting. And finally with that setup, and this is something that I love to do, is turn off your main light but leave your softbox there because we're going to use it as a reflector. Now what I did is turn off that big softbox and just open up to 2.8. And now the backdrop becomes your new light source. And you will see that the light just wraps around your model. And later on when you see the images, you can immediately spot the one that was done with the softbox and the one that was done with the backdrop. And if you like that look and you don't have a white backdrop or you don't feel like metering that white backdrop, there's a much easier solution. Get a huge softbox, for example a 2 meter softbox, and just place your model against the material of the softbox and then just let that light wrap around your model. It's a really, really cool way of shooting, especially for glamour, for example. That wraparound effect, it's almost like standing in a window with window light. It's really, really awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at those images. And I also experimented a little bit with the Lens Baby Omni system. And it's really cool to work with, but against the white backdrop, you can see the effects, but they're very, very, well, they're hardly visible, but if you know where to look, you can find them. Let's see if you can spot them. Okay guys, that was it for today. Now with this workshop, the results are, well, less than spectacular, for the very simple reason it's motion. I only have a few seconds to shoot, and I also have to explain the stuff to the students. And with this workshop we also give the students a lot more time to shoot, because freezing motion is incredibly difficult. And I can't say to the students, okay, let's take 3 shots and next setup, what we can do sometimes with other setups like classical masters. There's actually only one thing that really works and everything else is like a compromise. So with freezing motion I give more attention for the students to shoot, and I shoot as short as possible. So that's why today the results are a little bit mediocre or even bad, but at least you saw the lighting setups, and I hope you have a lot of information from the tips that I give you. If you like what we do, subscribe to our channel, leave comments below, smash that like button because we really like that. Most of all, tell other people about our channel so we can grow. And if you want behind the scenes images, and very soon we're going to start even with 360 images, make sure to join our Patreon. I'll leave the link below. That's really cool. Patreon is awesome. Okay guys, see you again next week for another Behind Closed Doors. Bye guys.